Most internationals want to be respectful, contribute to Denmark, and of course, comply with the norms of their new home.
We often focus on the unwritten rules of living in Denmark, but today we're focusing on the written rules and laws as we're joined by a member of Denmark's police force.
Policing can differ from place to place, so this episode will help you understand the role of Denmark's police in your everyday Danish life.
My name is Derek Hartman.
And I'm Brooke Black. Hello.
And I'm Mike Walsh.
And we are so excited to be joined by Allan Hansen today. He is the Deputy Chief Superintendent of Copenhagen's Police Department. Welcome, Allan.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Thank you for having me.
Yay, we're excited to have you.
Of course, we have your title here. Can you tell us a little bit about where things fall and sort of, we're going to be talking a lot about policing and how it works, but sort of what distinguishes you in your role and also Copenhagen Police and where that fits in Denmark's policing in general?
Yeah, I'll start with myself just shortly. I've been in Copenhagen Police Department for very close to 30 years now.
Wow.
I worked with everything from regular patrol, hooligans, drugs, and then I've been within the management line of work for the last close to 20 years. And that's been ranging from traffic, border control, HR, public service, stuff like that. So, yeah. Touching on Copenhagen Police and where it fits in, you know, how it's all organized. Of course, as a capital, I think you'll see that in every country. The capital is always different. Sure. It attracts a lot of politics. It attracts, in Copenhagen as well, royalties. And by that, it also attracts a lot of tourists and a lot of newcomers. And that's why I'm here today. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, really excited to be here. And a topic we don't always think of because you sort of think that, policing is the same everywhere. But then I think we realize, wow, I don't know who I would call for certain things or how policing might be different here in Denmark. So I'm really glad that we can, sort of address some of these things and these questions that I know a lot of our listeners have.
Yeah.
You had mentioned before we started recording about how Denmark compares to other countries, and
Yep.
I'd be really curious to see, because we're in this room, we're all Americans, so we have our view, but we'd love to hear yours.
Sure. I mean, my take on the differences I have mainly from visiting America or watching a lot of American movies where you have highway patrol, state police, the FBI. You would have sheriff department, all those different kinds of policing units that kind of try and work together, and they're not always really, because who has jurisdiction?
Right.
In Denmark, it's a lot more simple because we're one national police. There's only one police force to uphold the law, and so the jurisdiction falls under one universal organization, and that's the Danish police. So it's quite simple, and therefore it makes it a lot easier to understand, I think.
So every function in Denmark, and then we see it, like when you come through passport control, it's politi. When you see people in the patrol cars, it's politi. So basically, the remit for the national police is everything when it comes to essentially day-to-day policing, correct?
Yes. Of course, we differ in how we train and how we get educated along our careers. But all police officers have the same base training. The only difference I would point out is that we have something called police cadets. So they are police. They have police authority, but not in all the same areas. And you can obtain that job at the age of 18, whereas to join the police academy, you have to be at the age of 21. Okay. So that's a difference there. But all police officers have the same base training. Then, of course, we specialize into traffic or to intelligence or investigation or financial crime or whatever it might be. And then we also depend on a lot of civilians that we hire from outside for border control, first-line border control, administrative work, HR, stuff like that.
How would you describe Denmark's approach to policing for those of us that didn't grow up here? Is there like an ethos? Is there like, these are the values, this is what we're, always striving towards?
Yeah, I think we try to engage a lot with the public as much as we can. We also try to be as open as we can. Hence this interview. So it's a lot about trying to get into the dialogue. And then we quite often use the press to get in contact with witnesses and give information to the public as well. So I think our approach is, I know that some countries I've heard of where the public can be a bit intimidated by approaching a police officer. And I certainly hope that's not the case here, whether you're a Danish citizen or whether you're a tourist or whether you're someone who decided to spend your life here, even though you're not Danish. Please don't be afraid to approach us. We are really here just to help.
There's a meme that's been going around. It's a Danish police officer holding up like the beer keg for like someone that's like not to fear the Danish police. It's
I think at a summer music festival or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good example of how it's changed. I mean, I can see the change over 30 years. That perhaps 25 years ago, we weren't so open to having those kind of pictures in the media with police officers attending. But realizing that there's this saying about how we recruit, and we have to be a reflection of the general public when we recruit for the police academy. Yeah. And if we do that, then we also have to be able to interact with the general public. And holding up the beer keg at a festival is actually quite a good example, of playing street soccer or skateboarding or whatever it might be, but that we are able to interact with the public on a level where it does not always have to be about someone breaking the law or being in trouble. Building a relationship, I think.
So with the emphasis on relationships of the community that you're serving, would you say that you're well received, or how does the public usually interact with members of the police force?
Yeah, I think in general that we are. And I think some of the examples that you've given with the pictures actually exemplifies that we are have a good relationship with the public. I think we can also see it when we post someone who's gone missing. The relationship that we have there with different organizations that are willing to help us, the response that we get, the willingness from the public to reach out and let us know what they've seen, witnesses for serious crime and stuff like that. So I think we do have it. We have these annual surveys, and I think we score quite well in how people perceive us as a police force. How credible we are, stuff like that. I think we are I believe we're in the top 5 of organizations.
With such a big international population in Copenhagen, how do you deal with language barriers?
Well, when it comes to English, I think that a lot of Danes, as you might have experienced yourself, they speak an okay or even sometimes a very good English. So they're always willing to help. When it comes to a lot of other languages, fortunately, we have a lot of people that are employed within the police force that speak a third or even a fourth language. Everything from, I think we've even had someone speaking Greek or a bit of Japanese, French, Spanish. Wow. A lot of people from the Eastern European countries, all the dialects from the Arabic countries and the Hindus, the Pashto from India and Pakistan, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different people within the organization that speak different languages. But if it comes down to something that's a bit more serious, or there's been a crime committed or we go to court, we rely on a group of educated translators.
I find one of the biggest challenges when you're an international is just trying to pronounce the street names so that somebody who's Danish can understand where I'm living, and that's probably the most challenging part. Is there any way that, and that's a big intimidating thing, if somebody calls up, I know I've had that issue with, say, the public services or something like that, to help us be able to communicate easily? Are there apps that people can use or other ways people can communicate with you if they're not comfortable on the phone?
Well, we do receive all the inquiries either by writing or by phone, or you can turn up in person. We do have the open front desk at Central Station, so that's also an opportunity. And I think just as an advice, if you have a street name you don't know how to pronounce it, find a street name very close to that you know how to pronounce, and then most people within the police force were able to just find a map and say, "Is this what you mean?" And then we'll figure it out.
I know that we're talking about Copenhagen specifically, but since it's all one unified force, I mean, is there kind of a lot of the allocation of force in like the major cities in Denmark? And then how is it kind of like, how do you decide what goes where and where the most resources are needed?
Well, that's a Danish resource model that basically tells how much of the national funding goes to each police district. There are certain types of tasks that we mainly see in Copenhagen because we have the parliament, the Danish parliament in Copenhagen. If you have a political protest, where do you want that to take place? Right. Where the politicians are. So therefore, we see a lot of political protests taking place in Copenhagen. A lot of these international summits. We have the chairmanship for the EU Commission at the moment for this half year in Denmark. And I think we will see a lot of those meetings taking place in Copenhagen because it's just easier to get in and out from because of Copenhagen Airport, the infrastructure, the meeting facilities and stuff like that. So of course there are more resources, at least per square meter in Copenhagen than we would see in any other police district because it's just a lot of people and a lot of events concentrated in a small area.
But you do have a very much like Denmark, very tech forward way of approaching things. Because when I first moved to Denmark, I was in a very small village in Jylland, and I didn't see a cop car for 2 or 3 years. And it was my husband was like, "You better not speed even 1 kilometer over the speeding limit." And then ironically, he got a speeding ticket, but it was sent in the mail, because there's the speed traps and all of that stuff. But I think there was one police officer in like a neighboring village, and he was just doing kind of office work, maybe because there wasn't a need for it. But it was really shocking to me as someone who lived in big cities.
I understand that you would have had that experience. We use what we call intelligence-led policing. So we have a lot of data, where do we see incidents being reported from? Where do we see crime actually taking place? And we use all that data to try and justify where do we then spend our resources. And that would be no different than, you would see a lot of probably a bit more intense policing around the major cities, especially around, maybe during the weekends or during a festival or where people gather up. So I think it makes sense that we try and use the data that we have to try and figure out how to spend our resources.
It's really interesting.
It makes a lot of sense. And I know that is sort of a myth people may have that, okay, just because you don't see the police in one area that policing is not happening or that things are a little bit of a lower.
It kind of scares me even more because I was like, I'm confused. I don't see anybody and maybe this is fine, but it is like a secret, what unmarked vans or things like that where you will be found. You will get an email with your tickets.
But on that note, there's some other sort of myths and things that that people may have. And we thought it could be fun to sort of run down some things we've commonly heard. Maybe they're urban legends. Maybe there is some truth behind them, and you can maybe help clear up. But we'll go around and kind of go through some. One is something that I hear a lot, especially as the fall months and the winter months are approaching, that it's illegal not to have lights on my bike. Is that something that I should worry about if I'm in Denmark?
Well, you should know about it. I wouldn't say you should worry about it because from sunrise to sunset, you can ride your bike without any lights on it. But after sunset and until sunrise, you must have working lights on your bike.
Right.
General rule is that you have to be visible from about 300 meters. That's a bit hard to do in Copenhagen because there's so much other light that will, but make sure you have lights on your bike if it gets dark or at least after sunset. It could get dark beforehand due to the weather conditions. So
I didn't know it was illegal.
It is illegal.
Oh God.
It's a safety thing, I guess.
Well, of course,
Yeah.
but if if your battery goes out, I didn't do it. I'm just saying.
Of course, you would never not have lights on your bike.
Okay,
that's why we have 7-Eleven, especially in Copenhagen.
Exactly.
It's a big seller. Yeah.
Okay, another one is, which I will never break the law on this ever now that I've moved here, is jaywalking is heavily enforced.
I wouldn't say it's heavily enforced, and not necessarily by the police, but it is enforced by culture. And that's one of the big things about traffic in Denmark. Now, if a Dane in traffic has right of way, he's going to use that right of way. And that's why you don't want to jaywalk, because if traffic comes, of course, he's not going to run into you on purpose, but you can make sure he's going to honk his horn and do everything he can to let you know that you were in the wrong here. So, just respect that. If it's not free to pass the road, just don't do it. Walk to the nearest intersection, wait for the little green man to arrive, and then you can just cross. It's quite simple, and usually I'm not sure you're going to make up a lot of time by jaywalking.
But if you are a tourist here, you don't know that because every country is different, right?
Yeah.
And even from New York to LA, it's different. So I think...
I've seen some countries where I was the only one standing because it was red and everybody was walking. I was like...
I feel like I went to Rome for a weekend.
Do I dare?
But I've had a friend who jaywalked not on purpose in Copenhagen when there was no one around at night, and he got stopped and severely reprimanded. And so now he knows, but he was like, I'm sorry, I have just been here for the day. I've never been here before.
So you're reprimanded by the police or by
the police,
Oh, okay.
Well, general rule of thumb, red does mean don't go.
Yeah.
That's a pretty international standard.
Fortunately.
Logic.
Yeah.
How about drinking? I guess, is drinking legal in public here? Is there any rules people need to know about alcohol in public here?
Because Mike is very intoxicated.
Yeah. The general rule is you can drink in public. There might be certain places like train stations where there might be local rules. So please read the signs before you go in. Most train stations, most public places for public transport, you cannot.
Right.
But unless it's signposted differently, you can drink in public. Now the thing is, there's a limit to how you can behave in public. So make sure you can hold your drink.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, that's good because that was always our thing that we do when friends were visiting us here in Copenhagen was go to 7-Eleven, get a couple tall 2 classics, and go tour around the city. So I'm glad that we were fully compliant for that.
Yeah, we don't need a brown paper bag. Like
No. We did have a police officer yell at us when we had like the tip of a wine bottle showing in a like bag. We were living in Philly. We were in a park, and you could always the top of it. And she came over and reprimanded us for having a wine bottle visible.
All right.
There are bigger problems, I would think, in
Philadelphia,
Philadelphia when it comes to crimes being committed. But sure, we'll worry about the wine. It's nice to live here and not have to worry about that.
No.
But one that often comes up, especially when people visit, I get asked about is marijuana, cannabis. Is weed something that's legal? And there's always sort of the gray area, I guess, until recently with Christiania. But even across Denmark, what about the legalization of cannabis? Is that...
Well, that's a political issue, and I'm not really touching on that
Sure.
one.
But it would be a violation, right? It would be illegal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it would.
So it is not legal to smoke.
Possession with the intent to sell is illegal in Denmark. I get the gray areas or the misunderstandings because, you referred to Christiania. A year and a half ago, you could walk out there, you would have a little, primitive stand, and then would sell it there. Now, if you come as a tourist and you can see that the weed is being sold openly, then why wouldn't you think that it's legal?
Yeah.
And even the misconception has been among Danes for many, many years. I mean, when I was a young police officer on the streets, we would stop people and find weed in their pocket, and they would say, but I can have it because it's for my own personal use. So even amongst Danes, there's been this misunderstanding. As long as you have it for your own personal use, it would be legal.
But that's not true.
But it's not.
Right, I thought so.
It's not legal. You'll get a fine for possession, depending on the quantity. With the intent to sell, if you're very lucky, you'll get a fine. Otherwise, you might be sentenced to prison. So yeah, it's illegal.
So how did it work in Christianity? Was it just kind of like almost like a don't ask, don't tell, kind of look the other way kind of thing? Like, I don't want to put you on the spot for a political decision on this, but I think that's a...
Yeah, I mean, it's been the way it's been working. It's been problematic for years because we've tried different approaches. Where they're willing to work with us, then it got controlled by gangs. Yeah. And then, very unfortunately, it took a shooting and someone being shot before they had enough. Yeah. And when them having enough, and Copenhagen Kommune and the Copenhagen police, luckily we were able to join forces, and things have changed for the better.
Yeah.
What about swimming in the harbor? Obviously, a lot of people do it. It's a part of the tourist attraction.
Right.
But what about at night? Is it illegal to swim in the harbor at night?
I believe it is. Where you can swim in the harbour, there are marked swim zones. So you can find them on, I think, Copenhagen Kommune's website, or at least on a website called By and Havn. They will have all the swim zones there. The swim zones might have opening hours, so please check before you go swimming. But don't swim outside the official swim zones. The reasoning is that boat traffic, we even have the little bus as a boat running across the different canals in Copenhagen. And it can be very hard for them to see a little head sticking out of the water, someone trying to swim around. So, but there are swim zones and use them, but make sure you look for the opening hours if they have some.
Yeah, I know there's been a big campaign in the city about not standing on the edge. Speaking of our next topic, like peeing over the edge, if you're like, it says like, I'm not drunk, I don't feel drunk, but it's because that must happen a lot with so much being close to so much water, people falling in without meaning to, or thinking they can go for a swim when they can't.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a lot of people, but it takes a lot of focus when someone falls into the harbour, disappears for days, and unfortunately we find them a couple of days later and they've drowned. It tends to be men, and the reason is the peeing in public because they know it's illegal, which it is.
Yeah, that was our next one, was peeing in public.
So rather than peeing up some shop window, they say, oh well, the harbour's just here. I'm not sure the police is going to tell me off if I just pee in the harbour. And so they do, but they're so drunk that they lose their balance. Because when you're drunk and you want to look at something and you don't have a reference point, what happens to your balance? So that's what happens when you're standing there. You look into the water, it's dark, or you might see the light reflect a little bit. There's no focus point, and that just messes with your balance if you've had too much to drink. And unfortunately, people sometimes fall in and are unable to save themselves. So
I see so many bikes in there, and then I can't imagine on the people's side, it's just findings. I mean, that would be horrifying. So I'm sorry that's part of the job.
That's one of the more sadder stories, unfortunately. So Don't do that.
That's an easy one.
Don't pee in public in general.
That's good to know. And especially with all these things, of course, it's nice knowing where's the gray area, what are crimes and things. But when people do have something, if they, do maybe need assistance because they've fallen in or they think somebody is potentially going to be committing a crime, whether it's emergency or non-emergency, what would be advice, or what should we do, especially as internationals in those instances? Who do we call? How do we get in contact?
Internationally, you would always hear about the 911. I think everybody knows the concept of a 911 emergency service.
Yep.
In Denmark, it's 112. If you have an emergency, it's emergent right now. Someone's falling into the water. Someone is breaking into my house, or there's been a severe traffic accident. You can call 112. It's the emergency dispatch. If it's not an emergency, like let's say you come down to your basement, you realize the lock has been broken, you haven't been down there for a week, that's not an emergency. You can call 114, which is our service desk, and we will take your inquiry and we'll make the report. Also, if you have maybe someone's parked illegally and you can't get your car out, stuff that are less emergent, you can call 114. So if you have an emergency, it's 112. If you have something you want to report to the police or you have an inquiry, but it's not an emergency, it's 114.
Is 114 24/7, or is it only during business hours?
It's 24/7.
Okay.
That's good to know. I mean, the things that you realize, you think you've always known growing up, and yes, it was, coming from the U.S., it was 911. I know different countries have different numbers for that, but yes, I've been here 8.5 years and just never. I knew 112, but I did not know 114.
Yeah.
No. I mean, you touched on areas outside of Copenhagen. There is one thing you might want to know. A lot of people, when they want to call emergency services, use their mobile phone.
Yeah.
Now, the technology is that if you use your mobile phone, most of the time it'll recognize where you are and it'll put you through to the local police district. Sometimes it may not. And also you might have to use the prefix if you're calling from your American or your English phone or your Swedish phone or whatever. And that's +45 for Denmark.
Okay.
So you might get prompted with entering your zip code to reroute you. If you don't, you'll end up in Copenhagen police. So you can always just wait it out if you get prompted with entering a zip code when you want to call 114.
What if your Danish or English is not great and you're making that call? Is there other ways? You said you get a lot of writing inquiries as well, or how best to, if you're not comfortable with the language?
You can always write in English. If it's a different language, I think the local commune, I think you can go to borgerservice at kommunen. I think they might have some translation services. I think it's going to be difficult if we get, let's say, a writing in Chinese with a report.
Right.
Well, I mean, we wouldn't have a clue what it said.
Right.
Are we going to try and spend money on having that translated or what? But for most people, they can use Google Translate. It's actually quite a common tool for us.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it'll end up in some half-broken English, but we'll usually make sense of it. And at least as long as you have your contact information, when you file in the inquiry, we can always reach out to you and try and figure out what's going on.
Is there a weird call you've gotten, or the weirdest call that you've responded to, if you were comfortable sharing?
We got called to, it's called smoke from an apartment. So it could always be a apartment block on fire. So we have to respond quite urgent to that. And we come out, and now there's this elderly lady, I can't remember exactly what nationality she was, but she was trying to cook a national dish, which involved boiling a sheep's head. Oh. And she thought that's going to take some time, and she thought, I can just have a nap. And that nap turned a little longer than she anticipated, and so the pot boiled dry, and the sheep heads caught fire. Now, I've never seen smoke with that color before, and I've never smelled smoke smelling like that before. It was just, let's put it this way, it's quite unusual. And it's just, no one was hurt, luckily. Her pride, maybe. And the dinner was ruined.
Yeah.
So you didn't stay for dessert, I guess?
Delicious.
No, but
Aww.
I mean, it was different. That's probably why I remember it. Another one I do remember was also quite different. I think it was around early December, one early morning, and one of the local bus routes was on his way out to start his route. And he comes around a left turn, and then just as that left turn opens up, he comes to a bridge over one of the canals. Mm-hmm. Now, it being December, it got super cool from underneath, and so the road had ice on it. So the bus starts sliding sideways over the bridge, catches a dry patch, and then all of a sudden all the momentum starts moving forward. So the bus crashes through the railings, drops nose first into the canal, and then lands on the bottom and then the back of the bus standing on the bridge. We get the call and we get out there, and there's this completely soaked bus driver standing on the sidewalk next to his bus and saying, "It's my bus." Luckily, he was on his own because he was on his way to his route. So we got an ambulance for him to kind of warm it up. And then we could just, put a little police tape around the sidewalk, and they could come and pick the bus up later. But it's not every day you see one of those big yellow things standing nose first into the canal and then the back resting on the bridge.
I'm glad he wasn't hurt.
Yeah, nobody was hurt. So he actually managed to, once he got drenched in all the water, to climb up over the seats and then use one of these little hammers and then knock out the back window and then climb out.
Ones.
Wow. Yeah.
And then say, "It's my bus."
Yeah, he was very calm about it. He was just extremely collected. Just standing on the
That's very
sidewalk,
Danish.
kind of like raising your hands. It's like, "It's my bus."
I did that.
Danish.
I did
Yeah.
that.
And your response was, "There's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing."
Oh, that's funny.
Those are some. I like that. That's paints a picture, a different mix of all the different things.
It does. Speaking of the ambulance, so we've lived close to some pretty hot zones, I'd say, around the city, close to Nørreport Station. We live in Vesterbro now, and so we see often these yellow cars that say Socialans on them, especially around areas where you see a lot of people that are
I love this concept.
of the street, kind of on tough on their luck or dealing with drugs and things like that. How does that concept work? That's kind of new for us. Never seen that in the U.S. before. Does that come under the police? Does it come under the healthcare services? Is it a different organization? Because I think it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it comes on. It's not under the police. It's under the health services. Now, what they do is, it's a concept that started some years back in Copenhagen, and now just recently it's been expanded as well in Frederiksberg, I believe it is.
Okay.
They tried to pilot it in Midtjylland as well for a year, but I think they had to shut it down early.
Yeah.
But
The great thing about it is that they are trained paramedics, and I think one is a trained social worker. Now, they take care of the people who have ended up in a situation where they're not usually able to take care of themselves. It could be due to health issues, drug abuse, abuse of medicine, mental or psychiatric problems. And a lot of times when they don't see any other way, or it's not because they are short of funding, so the commune can't help them, they still have a place to live, so it's not like they need housing. It's just this odd where they just feel lost in falling in between all the organizations that are there to help them. Now, these guys from Socialangsten, they come out and they can do an assessment of what is actually needed here, and they can initiate a recovery plan through commune, through health services, through the psychiatric system. Now, as you can imagine, and which you probably already know from a lot of other countries, a lot of these people, when they run short of options of where to go, they will seek the police. Yeah. So we see a lot of these people who are not able to really take care of themselves, or have ended up in a really dire situation, either calling the police, their neighbors calling the police, or them looking up the police at Central Station. And so we have a very good relationship with Socialangsten, because we call them quite often and say, "Look, we have this person here, the story is so-and-so, could you come and help us out?" And they come, and they're just fantastic, and then they take over, because it's not a crime.
No.
Yeah.
Really. They just need help. Yeah. And we just have the facilities to help them, but they do. And they have the contact points to all the different organizations as well.
I really love hearing you talk about the way you work with them, because I lived in Los Angeles next to Skid Row, which is a lot of homeless people that have mental health issues, which could have benefited from a Sociolance situation instead of, unfortunately, like some more rough policing that didn't need to be the way it was. And so the fact that you have such a great working relationship, and you're like, this would actually be better for you, for your team than us. Like it's nice to hear, because we have such a different, fraught relationship with the police in the U.S. So I think it's just I mean, I never knew how the back end worked and how.
No, I mean, prior to Socialangsten, we could try and call a regular ambulance, but are they really gonna? I mean, you're not sick. You don't need a hospital. So are we going to use an ambulance for that? And then it's not really a police matter. So we would just try and, well, I can't really help you, so you're just back on the street. And then sometimes they knew that if they caused enough trouble, they would get arrested.
Yeah.
And then they would get a night in detention at a police station. But that beats the options of staying in the street.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's not really worthy, is it?
No, it's not a good use of resources. So it
No,
sounds
it's
like
not.
this
And it
is-
doesn't really solve the underlying problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And I think that's why social action is such a great initiative.
No, I think it's a big conversation in U.S. policing is that it falls on to police departments who
And it often
aren't trained in these
escalates.
matters.
Yeah,
Like
it often
it's
escalates and then just becomes criminalized, makes things even harder for.
correct. When you have people that are dealing primarily with addiction, I'd imagine that's probably, especially seeing
Mental issues.
out there a lot
Sure,
of mental
and
issues,
mental issues,
addiction, things where you almost can't hold them accountable entirely for what they're doing.
True.
Any pieces of practical information you wish internationals were more aware of? We've talked a bit about like internationals that either live here, have just moved here, or tourists. I think fall under all of that bucket.
Yeah. I'm sure some of the things that heads up or a little bit of a warning, they're quite universal. It's look out for yourself. You don't get scammed. But some of the most common scams I think we see is if you're a tourist and you're traveling around, you got your backpack or you got your purse and you want to sit at a restaurant and enjoying the view and you got your mobile phone on the table. All of a sudden someone comes over and asks for directions. Now they usually have a map or they have a newspaper. So one might distract you asking for direction, the other guy might play a newspaper. And then they say thank you and they walk away. Gone is your mobile phone, gone is your purse. People who leave their bags behind him on a restaurant or behind him in airports, behind him hotel queues and stuff like that, and all of a sudden it's gone. So keep an eye on your belongings. Another thing is that if you come here as an international student and you want to find a place to live, every time we get to the start of the educational system, usually around this time, August, start September, everybody's desperate for a place to live because they've been accepted to the university of any other sort of education. And if go online and find all these ads for, you can rent this room, but you have to pay up front because I'm not really there, I live abroad, all that kind of stuff. So the advice is always make sure you check up on who's living there, who owns the building or the apartment, and make sure you go and see it. We see the scam is that someone not even owning the apartment makes an ad saying, I have this apartment, I'll rent it out, I live abroad, I can't show you it, but I can give you access if you transfer me 3 months rent. Transfer 3 months rent, and that's the last you hear of them. So, be careful.
It's interesting because I just started following Politi on Facebook for updates. I hadn't known it was a thing that I could follow, and that's where I saw it was like a warning. Okay, students coming back, beware of scams, and I thought that was really helpful because I would have never even known about that.
No.
So the fact that you have this channel as well, and I'm sure you have many, but that's just the one that I follow. So that was really useful.
Sure. And speaking of campaign, you might have seen the campaign on the bus stops about how to ride your bike in Denmark.
Yes. All summer long, I've seen that from the tourists.
Yeah.
I was really glad they had that.
Yeah,
too.
so that's another big issue because Copenhagen is a city for a lot of bikes. You can rent a bike. Everybody has a bike. Unfortunately, not every Dane exhibits the example of how to ride your bike.
Right.
But the rule are you always ride on the right side of the road. You raise your hand for stops. You signal with your hands. You're not obliged to wear a helmet, but it's a very good idea. And like we talked about previously in the program, you must have lights on your bike when it's dark. And don't drive when you're intoxicated because you could crash and hurt yourself.
What about turning right on red, which every person on a bicycle does?
Illegal.
I know, right? And I got in trouble, and I was like, I don't understand. Like everybody else is doing it.
Correct.
And that's,
Yeah, they are, but it doesn't make it legal.
If everybody else was jumping
absolutely.
off a bridge.
but like that's how I learned the hard way.
Good point.
Only if I was peeing at
Right. Or driving a bus.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think, of being intoxicated and such, but also on just general tips for keeping safe. What about in the nightlife zones? Do you have any tips for people, especially maybe students who are coming here that are exploring those nightlife areas? Of course, in Copenhagen, there's a very big nightlife street in Aalborg, I know, and some other places where are those areas policed differently? And do you have any tips for students or anybody that's, wanting to keep safe on a night out?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, let me just say, I think most of the areas where you go out in town are safe in Denmark.
Yeah.
Great.
Point. Having said that, of course, if you feel unsafe because it might be a new place, you might not know a lot of people, my advice would be try and follow along with someone going out, but especially going home. If you don't have that opportunity, make an appointment with someone about you're going to call them when I get home. I'll be home around 4 o'clock in the morning. And if you get late, just text them and say, look, I'm running late. I'm fine. I'll be home by 6. And then give them a call or give them a text by 6. So someone at the other end, because it's always nice to know that, first of all, you've committed yourself to letting someone know that you're fine.
Yeah.
And then you also know that if you miss that, then someone is saying, hang on a minute, what's going on? And they might just call you. Whether we police the nightlife more heavily, yeah, I think we do. And it makes good sense. Back to the intelligence-led policing. We see a lot of people going out, people being intoxicated by alcohol and unfortunately also drugs. That raises the potential for conflict. And now our main concern is not to solve the crime, but it's to prevent it from happening. So it makes good sense that we put more police forces on trying to control and prevent things from happening in the nightlife rather than driving around a deserted neighborhood.
Sure.
So yeah, it is more heavily enforced.
How do you handle that? Because I feel like I see the police much less in Copenhagen than I ever did back in the U.S.
I was going to ask about police presence. Is there kind of
in the nightlife zones, like in Philadelphia, or I'm sure if you go in New York or L.A., like in the nightlife zones, like you see police everywhere, just cars on the corner, police standing there.
Almost the same number you would see a bouncer in front of a bar.
Exactly.
It's almost.
But I feel like I see much less. I mean, again, we lived across from Nordport Station, and it'd always be packed with teenagers waiting for the train to go back out to the suburbs on a Friday or Saturday night. And would rarely see police just walking around on there. Is it more using things like CCTV? Is it other approaches that you have rather than having a very visible approach that I think we're all used to seeing in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, we do work with other organizations. We work with the counties called Natteravn, and then Copenhagen has something called the Night Hosts. And they're just there to check up on people and say, look, are you all right? Have you had too much to drink? Do you need us for you to call someone to come and pick you up? And they're helping people out that could potentially end up in a vulnerable situation. Yeah. Now, if you don't see more police around in Copenhagen, the next question is it needed?
Sure.
Because if it's not, then, we might not be there. Another thing is, I think a lot of times in the U.S., when you see a patrol car, it only has one police officer in it. So they can double the amount of police cars. We don't do that in Denmark. Yeah. When we come to a police car, we always drive in pairs. Yeah. It's only on if you see a motorcycle cop that he's on his own. Otherwise, it's always 2 and 2. And I think even during the nightlife, I think even the motorcycles most often prefer to drive 2 and 2. Sure. So that would kind of limit to how many places you can see a police vehicle at any given time. I think that might be part of the explanation compared to what you're used to in the U.S.
And it also feels like in the U.S., the police are waiting for you to break the law because of the presence.
Right.
Whereas here, it's like, we trust you. Don't break the law. If you do, you'll get in trouble for it. But when we were back in the U.S., my daughters saw a cop car on the side of the road and were like, is someone hurt? Because they don't see it in that format. So is that something, is it kind of about Danish values as well, where it's like there's trust, or is it just that it's technology and we can't see it and it's more advanced? Because
I think it comes down to the trust issue. It comes more down to technology when something has happened. And then we need to investigate it and try and figure out what has happened. The trust has been raised in international media when you see someone leaving a kid outside for a nap. So that's the level of trust that we work with as in general. I think it's a cultural thing. So when doing that within policing as well, it just means that, first of all, we don't necessarily feel that we have to be everywhere at once. We have a very good relationship with most of the bars and pubs and the bouncers. Like I mentioned, the commune has several different people walking around that we can work with as well, and so I think we tend to focus, especially on one of the main goals for Danish police, and that is to prevent it before we try and solve it. So rather being there and preventing it, or having someone being our eyes and ears, so we can prevent it rather than a crime happening that we have to investigate and solve.
I do. One more thing on the Danish trust is when you mentioned being smart about not leaving your phone out or things like that. Part of the PR of Denmark is that because of trust, people do leave. Like I've seen someone get up and leave their laptop to go to the bathroom in a coffee shop or on the train, and that's very unusual, And I've now sometimes left my phone somewhere, and if I do that in other countries, my friends snatch it from the table. They're like, "Are you crazy?" Because I've unlearned this. But I don't know if you mean in of course, it's common sense not to leave your stuff out, but it is a very. I see people leave things all the time, like they'll leave their kid in a bike or while they're dropping off the other kids. So how do you manage that kind of?
I think it comes down to try and figure out what is the current currency, and I'm not talking about actual money, but what item has a value. E-bikes is the new currency. So beforehand, we saw a lot of bikes being stolen in Copenhagen, but they were usually bikes that weren't really worth that much. Now that's changed with e-bikes because they're worth a lot of money.
Right.
And unfortunately, we see a lot of foreigners coming in here, especially tourists, packing their e-bikes, riding around Copenhagen, wanting to explore Nyhavn, for example, on foot, and then leaving the e-bikes with the battery on. Now, before you know it, either battery or bike or both are gone.
Yep.
Or they'll park their camper van outside a hotel overnight with the e-bikes on the back, not being locked to the van. Next morning, e-bikes are gone. So it's also a question of, because mobile phones are still a valuable asset for someone to steal, but they're also traceable. Most e-bikes, unless you've GPS tagged it, are not traceable and can be sold in a lot of other places. They can't be blocked like you can block a mobile phone. Yeah. So try and figure out what is the currency when it comes to an item, and what precautions do I have to take myself to avoid my stuff being stolen.
It's good.
I wouldn't recommend leaving it and walking away from it.
Absolutely. It's just one of those things to navigate as an international. You're like, everyone does this here this way, so I'm going to do that. Oh, wait, that's not the right way to do it.
No.
So it's like a mix.
Personal preference.
Yeah.
It makes sense. The currency of an e-bike is pretty expensive. It's worth a lot, but a baby isn't really worth anything, so we'll leave that outside.
It's expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's going to cost you more money. You have to.
I think the police would
use
use slightly more resources in finding a lost baby than a lost bike.
That's fair.
I think that might hopefully holding people off that one.
As we're losing all of the parents listening. Sorry, it's just a joke. Is there one thing that you, if you could have internationals that are listening, take one thing away from today's episode that you would want people to walk away with? Any tip or any final thing that you think we should know?
We touched it briefly, and that is, if you need help as a foreigner or as a tourist in Denmark, don't be afraid to reach out. I mean, and don't be afraid. If you can't remember 112 and the difference between that and 114, just dial. We'll sort it out. Yeah. Don't be afraid. If you need help, you need help. It doesn't really matter if it's 112 or 114. We would love for you to be able to distinguish between the two. But if you don't, we will sort it out. Yeah. Most languages we can handle. If we can't handle it, we will find a translator. We have a very good group of translators that we work with. And then just in general, we are open to dialogue. We're open to talking to the public. Don't be afraid to approach us if you need help as a foreigner or as a tourist in Denmark, and especially in Copenhagen.
Fantastic. And thank you for helping us today and helping our listeners to find their place and where the police can fit into.
Thank you for reaching out, and thank you for the invite.
It's helpful for me, too, as someone who has grown up being kind of afraid of
a bit,
police. And it's just getting these resources and hearing from you as you've lived it for 30 years is really helpful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening and watching, everybody. Hi, hi.
Hi, hi.